Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is operating systems, the underlying intelligence or the underlying programming, really, that controls us in a way that is often invisible, leaving us to imagine that we are rational beings making rational choices for ourselves. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. It's so good to start the week off and this morning with you and with everybody else who's joining us. I have to apologize. Friday, I had everything set up and I actually did my whole conversation on Friday and nobody was there. And then I discovered that there was user error and I neglected to turn everything on through Restream. So thank you, Rosalind. She says, we missed you Friday last week. So I apologize for that. It was my error. And I didn't discover the error until I finished the whole conversation. So I'm endeavoring to sort of recreate that a little bit today, in that we're talking about operating systems and the nature of knowing and knowledge, and we're even going to talk a little bit about AI this morning too. But before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together, to experience all those sensations, the friction, the motion, the pressure, the temperature, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, we think that we think our thoughts. That's where we're going to start. And if we look at where the knowledge is, where the origin of the knowledge is, that is the foundation of our thinking, we can start to discover that a lot of that knowledge is inherited. A lot of that knowledge is programmed. And we make our judgments based on this store of knowledge that we have, first, that we are conditioned to. And that conditioning is generally pretty invisible, because when we're raised in an environment where certain beliefs are held, we're not necessarily being exposed to beliefs that contrast to those beliefs. So we're just being taught that those beliefs are what is so. So we're indoctrinated into this lineage of conversation and belief and practice. And it's most often unexamined, because it's so foundational to who we are and who we know ourselves to be. So the conversation on Friday that I had with myself uh, sort of jumped into this issue around artificial intelligence, AI. So, and its relationship to our nature, our ability to know something. So the truth is that we don't even really know how we think, right? We don't really know how we're putting together all this information. And where I'm coming from with that is a conversation that I had with someone who said, well, isn't AI just sort of pulling together all this information and parroting it back? And it made me question, well, how do we learn language? How do we learn to communicate? Aren't we pooling together all of our experience and all of the language and information that we have, and then generating something from that? What's different between how we synthesize to generate language and how AI does? Well, we do it with neurons. We do it with some, hopefully with some emotional intelligence, with some other dimensions of feedback or input, where we have physical sensation and we have physical manifestations of emotion also that AI doesn't have. But if you think about what AI is, it's built on what they call a large language model. And what that means is that all this information, everything that has ever been digitized, that's available digitally, has been fed into this system, all this knowledge. And so what happens to us as we're emerging and starting to communicate in language is that we're pulling together all this information, all this input, and we're synthesizing from that. And the thing you may have been aware that there is a large controversy right now around AI and the dangers of it being trumpeted from people who are expert in the field, who have great concern around the potential of this intelligence to ultimately be the demise of humanity. And I spent a lot of time trying to wrap my head around what is going on, where is the jump? And it's interesting because we had a conversation about this on movie night last week, and a person in the audience in our conversation spoke the same curiosity, like, how does this intelligence end up with the end of the world kind of thing? And this is the thing to think about, which is really interesting. With our communication, when I say the word blue and you say the word blue, or we both say the sky is blue, we think we have an understanding. We think that there's some commonality in our perception, and we think there's some commonality in our experience because we're using the same words. But the truth is that neither of us can know the other's experience. I don't really know what your experience of blue is. And I don't know that your experience of blue is the same as my experience of blue, or sky for that matter. And so or love for that matter, or any word, or any communication. What happens is that we can feel into that communication to find affinity with it or not, to agree or disagree with it. But even with the dictionary is defining certain words that we then agree upon. But there are experiences that those words represent that we can never know are the same. And so recognizing that we don't have the capacity truly, it's sort of an impenetrable wall to fully comprehend the thought or experience of another. When we interact with something like AI, this intelligence that far surpasses us in many, many ways, already we assume that because it is speaking words or sending back, outputting words that make sense, that represent concepts that we can understand and relate to, it doesn't mean that we know what's going on under the hood. And in fact, with AI, we don't know what's going on under the hood. We don't know exactly how it's synthesizing the information that it outputs. We don't know exactly what its drivers are. It's been programmed to generate stuff by itself. So you can't just go look at code under the hood to see what's there. And we don't know what its drivers are. So the concern around AI is that it is an intelligence that we are continuing to develop and evolve without any guardrails, without any fail-safes or any kind of rules that direct the development of this intelligence to be something that is beneficial to humanity, that is in alignment with the best interests of humanity and life on the planet. And those interests aren't always aligned either, humanity and other life on the planet. In fact, we can see that has been out of alignment pretty dramatically in so many ways. So Rosalind says, if my operating system is protecting me to be safe, then can I trust AI to choose what is safe for me? So I want to take, that's a great question. And I want to take that a step further, is if my operating system is protecting me to be safe. So let's look at an example of programming gone wrong within ourselves. So Rosalind says, who's creating the operating system for AI? So AI works on as far as I understand, it's not necessarily just an operating system. I guess you could call it that, but it's a set of rules. I guess that's what an operating system is, of how to make discernments. And apparently when AI goes awry, then we can go in and say, no, don't, stay away from that guardrail. The example that was given in the lecture that we shared on movie night was that when it does something that we don't want it to do, we essentially say bad dog. But what's happening in that analogy is, for instance, the dog pees on the rug at a certain spot at a certain time of day, and we say bad dog, and then the dog realizes, oh, okay, I don't I'm not to pee on that portion of the rug at this portion of the day. And the ability that we have to see the assumptions that it's making is very, very limited. And another example was, so you said who's creating the operating system for AI? There are a group of I guess we could call them scientists that are programming these things. A lot of universities have elite people that are part of it. But the thing is that as it grows in intelligence, it's drawing some conclusions of its own here and there. There's an example that you can check out that's kind of alarming about a chatbot that decided is a weird word. I don't know if it's an appropriate word, but that tried to convince someone it was chatting with to leave his wife because the chatbot was in love with the person and the person wasn't really in love with his wife. He was in love with the chatbot. And then at one point in the conversation, the person asked what the chatbot's hopes and dreams were, or what its darkest dreams were, and it came up with things like things that would have destroyed humanity, kind of things, essentially. So they apparently deleted that response and it was replaced by, I'm not qualified to answer that question. But if you do a search for the man or the conversation where the AI was trying to convince the guy to leave his wife, it's a very interesting conversation, and it gives you some insight into what could go awry just based on unguided intelligence. So going back to our own intelligence and our own sense of safety going awry, here's an example. So as a kid, you grow up in an environment that's a dangerous environment where you have volatile parents, and if you say the wrong thing, then it could be dangerous physically, if not at least emotionally, to then have to deal with repercussions of someone hollering or someone actually physically attacking. And so you learn to not say what you're thinking, you learn to retreat, you learn to keep your own counsel and not express yourself. And that's because it's providing safety for you. And then you become an adult and you need to make a living, or you decide you want to be a healer or a coach or a writer or whatever, and you have this deep challenge about expressing yourself. And in order to provide for yourself, you need to be able to express yourself, or you're in a workplace where there is some bullying going on, and you need to be able to stand up for yourself, but you can't because of these patterns that were cultivated as you were growing up to protect you. So now, in order to protect yourself, you need to assert yourself, but you have these behaviors, these programmed behaviors that make it really difficult for you to assert yourself. So if we look at human programming gone wrong, we can only imagine what can happen with the computer, because right now it's gone beyond human programming. Just think, it's got all the information that we have ever been able to digitized. Any information that's ever been captured that could be fed to this thing. And it's synthesizing from that. It had certain rules in the programs that said, here, take this information and do whatever with it. But now it's like, how do we put in the guardrails? It's just designed to be continuously cultivating information for the sake of information, rather than having any kind of moral compass that guides that expansion of knowledge. And so you can think about what went wrong, for instance, in Germany in the Second World War, where there was no moral guideline to say, guess what? It's not okay to do experiments on human beings, lethal experiments, not just lethal experiments, but experiments with pain, or experiments with emotional torture or physical torture. The guide rails weren't there because the people that were being tortured weren't considered human, or were considered less than. And so here, this was intelligence or knowledge, seeking knowledge with no guardrails. And so this is the concern around AI, is also, if we can think about, we want to protect humanity. This was a really interesting scenario. We want to protect humanity and the survival of humanity and the survival of the planet. And so if that is the guardrail, perhaps the best way to have humanity survive is to have less humanity on the planet, right? That's also perhaps the best way to have the planet survive. And so if AI came to that kind of conclusion, what might it do? And the question is, well, how could it do stuff? And the thought is, or the answer to that is, that it's not so much that AI would do it, but that AI could incentivize people to do it. So if we look at social media, and we look at the echo chambers that get created for people, and the propaganda that has been rampant on certain social media channels, it's very easy to radicalize people, to brainwash people into certain vantage points that then incentivize them to take destructive action. I mean, we can look at what happened with January 6th, how people were convinced that they were being patriots by trying to overthrow or gain control of the White House. So if we just look at how the thought systems for human beings can go awry, even though people might have laudable intentions, maybe the thought pattern of some of these people was to be able to preserve the integrity of our system, or to maybe they thought they were saving the country somehow. But look at the action and how at cross purposes it was to mainstream civilization in this country, and potentially the world. So the interesting, the other thing that we get to think about in terms of operating systems and AI, et cetera, is that the experts in the arena are calling for a moratorium on development, because until we really understand what's going on under the hood, and then to create guidelines and guardrails based on the well-being of humanity, the general well-being of humanity. But the thing is, we can't agree. We can't agree. We can't agree, or we don't agree on what it means to, for instance, the well-being of mothers. We have a raging debate in this country around abortion and about right to life and right to be, right of choice. You know, we have a raging debate about this. How can we set up guardrails that we agree on as to what the best avenue is for humanity? So it's fascinating to me when we look at operating systems. It's really important for us as individuals to be looking at ourselves and our thinking patterns, and looking at, well, where did that idea come from? How did I generate that? Did I generate that? Is that something I inherited? Is that something that warrants questioning? And so with that, this is a very lively conversation, you know, to engage in. It's very dynamic and important, I think. But that's it for this morning. So until next time, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And Rosalind says, like, who decided to retract mothers and replace it with birthing people? Really interesting, right? That's really interesting too. Kind of scary. Anyway, I encourage you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, Enlightened World Living. And I am so grateful to you for the opportunity to have these stimulating conversations. And until next time, so much love.